game is really hard, and the people who schedule these games, they don't really care about people who actually have to get up in the morning. So we'll see. We'll watch the beginning of the game, but we won't be able to see the end of the game, which I've never really quite understood why they don't start the game earlier and have the game end in prime time as opposed to having the game start in prime time. But when I become master of the universe, I will change that. But until then, we'll have to suffer through all this. But this could be it.
We have the senator ready to go.
7:04 here at Big 550 KTRS. Senator Roy Blunt, Merry Christmas. Thanks for joining us here on the Big 550 KTRS.
Hey, Merry Christmas. We're all good to be with you. I hope you're having a great Christmas, and wishing the best for a good year next year as well.
Thank you very much. We do the same as you. Now, let's talk about this bipartisan budget compromise. Where are you on this whole thing?
Well, I'm going to support the both packages, both the tax relief package and the spending package. Neither of them are perfect because you've got divided government, and that makes it impossible to get to a perfect place. My biggest disappointment with the spending bill is not as much in the spending parts as that we weren't able to do anything to really dramatically direct policy with that bill, the kind of things I'd hoped to do to not provide any money for some of these really bad regulations that the administration has out there, that like Waters of the U.S. and the power rule, and there are other rules that I wish we could have put a year stop on, and we'll still look for ways to do that. But when you just look at the spending priorities in the bill, it really does reflect different priorities with a different Congress. You know, I chair the bill for labor and education and health and human services, so for the first time in 12 years, research at NIH gets an increase, and it's a big increase. It's a 7% increase. That's the kind of research we can't do for ourselves. So much is happening in healthcare. So many families are impacted by things like Alzheimer's disease and cancer, and we just need to do a better job, and they're going to have more capacity to do that job. Now, to do that, we zero funded 23 new programs the president wanted to start and eliminated 18 old programs. So there is a change in priorities, and I think it's about time.
So what happened? Why can both parties and all the branches of government come together today that they couldn't do it years ago? What changed?
Well, the reason I think we were able to shift priorities as opposed to years ago is the Congress finally changed to where you have a more conservative Congress, a Republican Congress dealing with the president. And, you know, there aren't 60 Republicans in the Senate, so we can't easily pass every bill. But that changed. And then the other thing that changed is just, frankly, this work has to eventually get done. The real tragedy of the year is that we didn't handle these bills one at a time, even though for the first time in 6 years they were available and have been for months to be debated one at a time, so people could see what was going on, so you'd have the kind of debate that the other members frankly deserve. You know, the other members deserve to have the kind of input that only the appropriators have when you lump these bills together at the last minute. Supposedly, Harry Reid has agreed to remove the obstacles next year and let us get these bills to the floor starting in May or so, rather than doing this in December. But we've all heard those promises before. Hopefully, this is one that somehow can be enforced.
Lots of talk about this visa waiver program. There was a deal on this, and you've been sort of attached to this. It's a very confusing subject. Can you explain what was agreed to with this visa waiver program and where you are on it?
You know, the bill that I co-sponsored is the bill that's included now in the final bill, and it has more ability to add countries and take countries off the list whenever that needs to happen than the original Senate bill did. Interestingly, in a big debate we had about this with the Homeland Security, it really is a big hearing in Intel, and there's really no Intel prohibition here, I don't think. But I think part of the problem was even several of my colleagues on the Intel committee didn't understand that just because you're from a visa waiver country doesn't mean that you don't have to apply for the ability to come to the country, and your records are currently checked. And if something comes up, then in those countries you have to go for the interview. But of course, those are the countries we do the most travel with, because those are the countries we have generally the most business with. But I think we put the kind of provisions in now that if they don't have the kind of passports we think they ought to have with biometrics in the passport, if they're not sharing the information with us that we are willing to share with them about our watch list and everything else, they're no longer on the list, and that's totally fine. But I think part of the confusion was even well-informed members of Congress thought that if you were in a visa waiver country, flying from Paris to New York was the same as flying from New York to Toledo, Ohio, and it's not. There is a process you go through. We've just, I think, made that process a little better without making travel impossible, and the process better in a way that protects us better, and that's what we ought to be doing.
Roy Blunt with us. One more question for you, sir. You were quoted recently as saying that you've never been more scared after leaving some of those intelligence briefings and the top secret information that you have access to. You said this is the scariest time you've ever seen.
Well, it is. It is. And, everybody that briefs the dozen of us that are on the Intel committee for the other members of the Senate who don't have to hear this all the time says the same thing publicly they say privately, which is we've never had more threats coming from more directions at any time, nor have we been able to figure out what was going on in a worse way. The obstacles of figuring this out are great. The only difference with the Intel committee is then they give you the details of what some of those threats are, and the moment some of them are stopped, and there are lots of things going on. We are a target-rich country, particularly a country of soft targets where people should be expected to go freely and safely. And the government has a major obligation to keep people safe, and while you're doing that, to do everything you can to protect their privacy and freedom. But keeping the country secure is something that every mother expects, and every member of Congress should be doing everything they can to see that that happens.
Roy Blunt, Missouri Senator, thanks for checking in. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, my Christmas cards are stacking up there. I'll be by get them one of these days soon.
All right, fair enough. We will keep them aside for you.